Hey everyone, Sinara here. I'm just going to be covering a Phase 5 BIS list for Warriors, and if you're simply interested in what the correct items are in each slot, the best you can get, this here is enough for you. You can click off the video if you just want to look at this, but if you want to actually understand what items you should be picking as an upgrade and what items are actually good, like for example, you probably don't have an Empyrean Demolisher. Like you're not going to get this item unless you're paying thousands of gold to a World Boss Coalition. Stick with me for a little bit. I'm going to go through some of the items. And again, compare this to if I click on the Phase 5 BIS set that they have by Wowhead here, it's a little bit different. It's going to sim slightly worse. I'm going to cover why that is and what items are better than we thought they were in the past when we did Phase 5 originally. The first thing that you want to do is go to your rotation. I'm using the no recklessness rotation because most people are in a speedrunner type guild. They're not using recklessness on every boss. They're not going for insane parse numbers, going for hundreds, that kind of thing. They're either in an average guild or in a speedrunning guild. That is kind of the majority of the player base that is playing the game now. And if you're in a speedrunning guild, you're wrecking one, maybe two bosses. The majority of your damage is going to be done without recklessness. Something that you need to change if you're using this simulator, going into this phase, make sure that you put Heroic Strike rank 9 on. Sometimes it's defaulting to rank 8 and it's going to give you incorrect results because it won't cast it because it thinks that you only have rank 9. So make sure that you have rank 9 here under your action priority list. And then covering our settings, this is again, we're simming with full consumables, full world buffs, and with things like True Shot Aura, though that doesn't really make a big difference. But it does make some difference in the actual highest number here, but the upgrades are going to be about the same. Something that we want to cover, starting Rage and Heroic Strike Cleave Q delay. Because you're basically at this point of the game, Phase 5, when you get a whole bunch of gear, you've got world buffs, full consumes, that kind of thing, you're pumping, you are not going to have any delay on your Heroic Strike. You're not going to need to be queuing it. You can basically have this 100% uptime. 90% is easily achievable, even if you don't know what you're doing. Like it's very, very, very easy to have almost entire uptime on your Heroic Strike. What this does to the actual attack table is that it's going to push glancing blows off the table for most of your attacks, which is going to raise your crit cap for most attacks. So if you see over here, that we are over the melee crit cap with this gear. This is the BIS list by Wowhead or some other place that this simulator pulled it from. They are still over the crit cap with that, but that doesn't actually matter because all of your yellow hits, if we take a look at the results here, most of our damage in the fight is coming from yellow hits. The only part that isn't is melee mainhand, melee offhand. That's the only thing, and that's making up 24% of our damage. The rest of our damage all benefits from having a higher crit amount because it is a yellow hit. So if we go back to our settings and we change the Q delay to 0 because we are just going to be mashing Heroic Strike every time, our DPS is going to go up a little bit just because there is no point during our rotation now where we don't have a Heroic Strike queued if we don't need to. The only time we won't have it queued is if, for example, we just don't have Rage, we have less than 100% uptime, which is accounted for at some points in this simulator. So with this being said, that we don't really care about the crit cap because it's not really 50 or 45%, and it's more like 90% because the only thing the boss can do at this point is dodge your attack. We want to get as much crit as we can to keep that flurry uptime as high as possible so that we make our white attacks happen as frequently as possible and we make our Heroic Strikes go off as frequently as possible. This means that hit loses a lot of value past 6%. And if we simulate it here, so these are the stat weights that load in by default. These are what they simmed in an earlier phase, like phase 1 on pre-BIS. If we calculate what our stat weights here are, it's going to show hit at almost 0. It's slightly more than 0 because you still do a little bit of white hits, and when you don't have Heroic Strike queued up, if your white hit goes through, then at that point, white hit offhand, it could potentially miss. But if Heroic Strike is queued, all the hit is doing is raising your crit cap on the offhand. So you see here, we had EP simming at about 30 previously. We're saying that melee hit is worth about 5. And this can be proved by if we just remove a shoulder, right? So we're simming without a shoulder, we're at 10% hit, and we put on that stupid worm hide thing that has just 2% hit and nothing else. there is literally no DPS change almost. There is a tiny amount of change that's going to happen on those crit cap being raised a little bit on the offhand weapon, but in reality, really nothing is changing by adding more hit past the cap. This means that we don't want to pick items that have hit if we don't need to. Things like Lionheart Helm, you want to pick this item because it has 2% crit and 18 strength, and nothing is really going to touch that. I'm simming for a human warrior on the Alliance side, so we have both Kings and ZG buff. So raw stats are going to be a little bit more powerful than they would be on the Horde side. So things like the Mantle of Wicked Revenge are actually going to be significantly better than things like Conqueror Spalders. We pick that, again, about a 6 DPS increase choosing that item. So if we go to our stat weights again, and we actually input what they really are, we say that strength is equal to this. We say that this is equal to this. We say melee hit, it's actually worth about 5 points. 5.3 will be exact. We'll do 31.5 for the crit, 31.05. Expertise is weapon skill. It's not really worth factoring in because the calculations are kind of wrong. It is going to raise your damage a little bit, but again, the only thing that should be glancing if you have Heroic Strike Q all the time is your offhand when it doesn't crit. So it's a smaller portion of your DPS relatively. So when we plug this in here, this is actually going to change what shows up at the top of our list and what's actually going to be the best. So if we sim like this, where we have what's said to be phase 5 BIS, and we have that 0 delay on casting Heroic Strike, we have all of our buffs, and we have the rotation input correctly with no recklessness, we're going to get about 1932 DPS. We can actually increase this by actually picking the better items. Barb Choker is still quite good because it's got 1 crit, 44 AP, but if you have an Onytooth Neck, it's really not going to be much of an upgrade for you. It's simming basically identical, and I think Presters might even be better at this point. Like, it might not show it, but it has the agility, it scales. On Horde side, this isn't going to be as good. On Alliance side, this is a very good item. But let's say Barb Choker is the best. Sims like 2 DPS higher. Conqueror Spalders are now below Drake Talon Pauldrons and Wicked Revenge because they have less stats and they have that hit, which is completely unnecessary in most cases. We're going to pick Wicked Revenge. Cloak of the Fallen God. It is the best item, though the Cloak of Draconic Might is very close. And the one that we're going to pick in Nax as well is about the same as Cloak of the Fallen God. You do get one of these every week. Your healers are probably going to get the first Cthulhu Eye every week, but more than likely you'll eventually get this item, so you should shoot for it. It is going to be the best due to the simple nature of it having raw stats. If you're on Horde side, Shroud of Dominion is going to be better. Breastplate of Annihilation, it's still simming really high, though on Alliance side, you basically always want to take Conqueror's Breastplate. This thing has 3 less strength, but it has more agility. The extra crit is very powerful. They're going to sim very, very close to each other. And even SGC, when we plug that in, is going to be very close. Just because it has something like almost 3% crit after you take in those buffs, plus the 2% on the item innately, makes it very, very compelling as a choice. Annihilation, yeah, simming almost exactly the same. You want the Conquerors because it just makes you tankier. It's even simming a little bit higher. These ones that it selects, Karaji Executioner Bracers, more of a rogue item, I'd say, because it has hit on it, and rogues do benefit from hit. Hive Defiler is a lot better on the ally side. That 18 agility basically turning into more than 1% crit, you definitely want that item. I'm not going to cover weapons yet because it's going to change what our DPS profile looks like when we compare it to the actual BIS set that they say is phase 5 BIS in a second here. But I will cover Gauntlets of Annihilation. If you want to move and get Gloves of Enforcement, you're really not giving up much DPS taking this item. In fact, your guild should be giving out Gloves of Enforcement to warriors rather than rogues. Rogues barely benefit from this item. Like, it is maybe like a 7 DPS increase for them, but over our second best item, which is saying it's Flame Guard Gauntlets at this point, right? Like, it is a much bigger DPS increase, going from, say, 1939 here. It's about a 10 DPS increase for warriors. It's actually going to be higher, and your warrior who gets this item is never going to replace it, while your rogue is going to replace this item with the Bone Scythe set when they come to Nax. but we'll put on Gauntlets of Annihilation because it is just a tiny bit better. Onslaught Girdle is still going to be the best, though Belt of Never-Ending Agony, for the same reasons I spoke about with the Gauntlets of Annihilation and the Gloves of Enforcement, that should be given to warriors most likely. It is very, very similar to Onslaught Girdle. It's not going to sim much worse at all. And rogues will replace that item. On Horde side, they might not. On Horde side, they may just use the tier chest, but on Alliance side, they don't want to use the 8 out of 8 set tier chest. But you are going to probably give all 9 of the Bone Scythe items to your rogues anyway, so they're going to have them for those slots, and they can swap out as they see fit. It's not necessary to give the Belt of Never-Ending Agony to a rogue, even though it's BIS, because their next item is not a lot worse. And for a warrior, Zandalar Vindicator's belt is like significantly worse than just taking the Belt of Never-Ending Agony. So if we go back to Onslaught Girdle, because that is the best, this is what we are simming at. Conqueror's Leg Guards. It's showing that Sand Scale Reaver leggings are actually better. I disagree. Conqueror's Leg Guards are probably going to be the better item, and there's not going to be a big DPS difference here. Yeah, like, these are even simming higher, so the stat weights are probably, again, just a little bit wrong because we've been changing some items. These give you a huge amount of strength and crit. They even have that one hit on there for the 5 points that it's worth. It's really not that great, but it does let you switch out the DFT later, and I'll show you why DFT is kind of a bait item and you don't really want to pick it. Chromatic Boots, they do sim lower than Boots of the Vanguard, but it's so small that you probably just want to take Chromatic Boots anyway. If you want to get hit on any of your items, this is the one that's it, because you give up like the smallest amount of stats for it. If I sim this, it'll probably be slightly higher. Yeah, it's not even simming higher in this case. It's almost exactly the same. Ring of Karaji Fury should be about the same as Circlet of Applied Force. Actually, it's simming worse than Circle of Applied Force, which makes sense. You get more crit from Circle of Applied Force, and the stat weights, again, are probably incorrect. If I run this again, I bet it will say that melee crit's worth about like 50. Let's do that now. What I'm showing you here is really that the crit cap does not matter. The crit cap really doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. You don't need to worry about it, because you want as much crit as you can so that your yellow abilities are even better. And we looked at it again, see, hit value went down, strength, agility went up, and so did melee crit. So if we put in this and upgrade to what it looks like when we've almost finished out our full set, we don't need to recalculate. This is going to just show us boom, boom. This is actually the best ring now. And Quick Strike Ring is also the second best. The fun thing here is that Drakefang Talisman, it doesn't really know what to do with trinkets. This is actually worse than Hand of Justice in most setups. Yeah, so it's a DPS increase to pass the DFT to one of your other party members, which is crazy to think about because that trinket is hyped like nothing else in the game in tier 2. But it's just not that good on Warrior. The Hand of Justice scaling with your attack power, it gets better as you get more gear. So you just want to have that item over the flat 50 attack power. We've reached that breakpoint once you're almost all kitted out in what you've got here in Phase 5. As for weapons, so we'll show here, we've got basically everything BIS. This is like the highest that you can get in any slot. Diamond Flask is still going to be the best trinket. This is on a 60-second fight, plus or minus 15 seconds. So that's going to be close to what you are going to get through most of the first couple bosses in AQ40. And it's not going to be stuff like Cthulhu Twin Emps, like those big long fights. You will need to change your sim, but these items should still be best because having high crit is going to be more consistent. So if we save this as reference, right? We're getting 1960 DPS. We click on what they say Phase 5 DPS should be. I don't even know if it went through here. No, it did not. Right, so we're up about 26 DPS by picking slightly better items. A non-contested item in the shoulder slot for the most part. We are picking a slightly more contested bracer. And we are taking maybe a more slightly contested ring with tanks. And then we're not taking DFT. So 2 of the items we're taking are slightly more contested, and 2 of them are not contested at all. And then I'll quickly cover what you might want to use if you don't actually have Inferior Demolisher. You can use CTS in the main hand, and then you can use Maladath in the offhand if you have it. And then the other option, if you don't, is you can do AQR and CTS. CTS has really good stats, so it's generally just a little bit better than AQR, but because of the speed, you want it in the offhand. This is going to sim worse than Empyrean Demolisher, but you're just very, very unlikely to have that item. Again, you'd have to pay the coalition of guilds that control the world bosses so much money that it's just probably not worth it. In any case, it's really not worth it to farm the world bosses, period. Anyways, though, there you have it. If you want to go back to the start of the video to see what the exact full BIS is, you could do so, but that has changed slightly. Again, we're not going to be wearing Conqueror Spalders. We don't care so much about Breastplate of Annihilation on Alliance side. Horde side, this is still BIS. We like Conqueror's Leguards, and we have a couple options for belt and gloves because they're going to be limited and we might not get the exact one we want in 15 or so lockouts of AQ before next comes out. If this helped you, leave a like, and thanks for watching.